Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, this is the Garbage Time Takes podcast, and we are back from our month-long and an extra week hiatus after winter break to bring back all the joy to your lives that we know that you've been missing with our recent departure from the airwaves.
That's right.
Today with me, my name is Derek, are my co-host, Dennis.
That's right. And Bobby.
Today we have quite a bit to talk about and not a whole lot of time to do it, unfortunately. So our segments will be a bit more abbreviated than we'd like, but we're still going to give you as much information and entertainment as we can today. So, getting right into it, since it's been a month and a week or so, there's been a lot that's gone down in the sports world, from the national championship to the Astros scandal to Zion making his return. We have a lot to talk about, and so let's just jump right into it if you guys are ready.
I'm ready to roll. What about you, Dennis?
Ready as could be. Let's do it.
So, I guess the first place we should start, the obvious choice, is going back just briefly to visit the national championship game. As everyone knows, LSU did win. They beat Clemson in the national championship. Joe Burrow, future Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, led the Tigers to a 42-25 victory over Trevor Lawrence and Clemson. Guys, what'd you think? Was that expected, unexpected? What's your thoughts?
You know, I think it was. I thought it was a really great game in the first half, and I'm kind of disappointed that LSU seemed to pull away late. I mean, I think it just came down to LSU was probably the better team. And their stamina and their wherewithal, talent showed through in the second half as compared to the first. I thought Joe Burrow played a pretty solid game, and you know LSU rolled as I thought was to be expected. But overall, good game. I just wish it would have been closer in the second half. I just think that it's crazy that was first loss of Trevor Lawrence's college career.
That's right.
And I think that's overlooked by many. I mean, I know he didn't necessarily have the performance that many Clemson faithful hoped he would in the national championship game, but I think winning cannot be overlooked, and that man has certainly done that.
Yeah, the victory by LSU. Clemson had a win streak of 29 games, by far and away the longest in the country since Alabama had a down year this year. But yeah, LSU beat 6 teams that were in the top 13 in the final, college football playoff rankings. So that says all they have to say about, their toughness, their ability to win games. And, Clemson got to Joe early. They sacked him 5 times throughout the course of the game, but they could only hope to contain him. They could not stop him. And he ended up throwing for 463 yards and 5 tubs. Randy Moss's son, Thaddeus Moss, had an excellent game. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, those guys were pretty much exposing Clemson DBs on deep routes all game long. Dennis, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you guys have just said. I think it was interesting that the Clemson defense was able to kind of get to Joe Burrow in the first half, especially in the first quarter. But I was just really impressed with his resiliency. I think that's something that we haven't necessarily seen from an LSU team that's pretty much just rolled through most of the season. They finally played a team that, like you said, won 29 in a row. They obviously gave them a tough time. It's a good defensive team that Clemson has. And so Joe had his work cut out for him, but he was able to bounce back from a rough start. And, as a future Joe Burrow fan, and when he comes to Cincinnati next year, that's something you truly love to see is the resiliency, because he's going to need that when he gets to the NFL.
And then, of course, you had OBJ putting himself in the media once again. The man just is a headline chaser, so it appears, but, gets caught smacking a security guard on the arse. And, what do you got to say, Bob? I see you smiling.
I got 2 words for that whole situation. Clown show.
That's
Clown
right.
show, and
That's all I will say on that matter.
Yeah, he was clearly not sober, also handing out $100 bills to the players, and, LSU trying to say that it was fake money. Joe Burrow went on the Part of My Takes podcast with the Barstool and said, no, it was real money. So we'll see what happens from that. Probably nothing.
Odell Beckham Jr. is an absolute buffoon, and I'll say it now, and I'll say it whenever you want me to say it, because the guy is just... I've just never been a fan. He makes one great catch, and suddenly he's a superstar.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't even think he's athletically talented, but as a receiver, I don't think he's a fantastic receiver by any means, and then he goes and pulls crap like that. It's just infuriating to me.
Yeah, I think there's no denying OBJ's athletic ability.
No, you can't deny the athletic ability.
But
It's
I also have been very clear in my own personal conversations and experiences, and that I've never really thought OBJ was an elite receiver. I too think he made one fantastic catch, and it just kind of took off with his career from there. But he's consistently been, shut down by good corners, elite corners, and he still doesn't have a playoff win. And, you can attribute that to the teams he's been on. But this Cleveland team was supposed to be Super Bowl champions at the beginning of the year. I remember all of the media getting, all worked up, saying that the Browns were one of the most athletic teams there was. And
primetime games for no reason.
Baker Mayfield was going to come out and destroy and light the NFL on fire, but it ended up being the other team in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens, that did that, even though they bounced out early in the playoffs. But speaking of buffoons, Antonio Brown, the man just cannot catch a break. He recently turned himself in for the warrant for his arrest stemming from burglary and assault outside.
Felony.
Felony
assault,
charge outside of his home in Hollywood, Florida. He also released a new single, by the way. I don't know if you took a look at that. I don't remember what the song's called, but he released a song about a week ago. So you may have to get on that, Bobby. But yeah, Antonio Brown just cannot catch a break. You wonder, where his mental state is at this point.
I don't think there's any room to wonder. I think it's room to say that it's completely gone. I don't know what's happening. I think it's a combination of the fame and fortune and the yes men just spurring on what more than likely is some sort of mental disorder maybe, or something, disease, or trauma that he's dealing with. It's sad to see. I just wish the guy could have kept it, kept between the white lines to keep playing. And I don't think he'll ever make it back to the league at this rate. But certainly glad to see that he didn't end up in a confrontation with the police. I know he had barricaded himself inside his house for a while. And
could have been a SWAT team situation.
The entertainer part of me would really, really love to see there been a storming of Antonio Brown's house, but for the safety of everybody involved, it was good. It was a good move by AB to turn himself in, and part of me is very surprised that he even came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
I know that his some of his legal team has left him after some of his recent antics, and his agent has dropped him. So he's got a lot of people that aren't in his corner anymore, and I don't whether that was his own decision or somebody close to him. He made the right call in there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I agree with Bobby that there's part of that entertainment value that would have been interesting to see what would have happened if he didn't turn himself in, but this is probably the first smart thing he's done in over a year. I've got to wonder if there's any sort of mental damage. I mean, complete speculation, but I always wonder about that hit from Vontaze Burfict in that playoff game. It seems to me that a lot of things went downhill following that.
Can't argue through there.
But obviously I don't know for sure. And maybe he doesn't even know exactly what happened there, but he's been on a rough go of things, and it's not getting any better for him.
But yeah, I guess we technically should have prefaced our comments for those of you who didn't know. Antonio Brown was charged of felony burglary with battery, burglary of an unoccupied conveyance, as well as criminal mischief. He turned himself in after his arrest warrant, and then it seems that earlier today, an hour ago, ESPN reported that Antonio Brown was granted bail after he initially was denied bail. He posted his $100,000 bail bond, and he's going to be required to get GPS monitoring, release his passport and guns, and go through drug and alcohol testing as well as a mental health evaluation. So hopefully once all this, gets underway, we can
Interesting to see that mental health eval.
That's what I was about to get to. Hopefully the mental health evaluation. I guess it would be, both good and bad if it showed that, something was actually wrong with him mentally. And if there's not something wrong with him mentally, then, who knows what's really going through Antonio Brown's mind other than himself. So all the best to him. It's sad to see.
I want to see him in the league again.
He's a dynamic player. That one game he had with New England was absolutely amazing. And, as the season went on, it sure looked like New England could have used him, but he just couldn't keep himself right. So all the best to AB. Hopefully he gets himself right. Moving on, the Houston Astros, as we mentioned right in the intro of the podcast, they were exposed as cheaters. After some speculation, after some whistleblowing by some former players, the Astros were exposed after the MLB's investigation, and some significant penalties were handed down. Some people felt that it wasn't quite enough. Some people felt that it was just enough. What do you guys think? There was suspensions handed to A.J. Hinch, to the Astros GM. We know in the aftermath of that, they were both fired, along with Boston Red Sox manager Alex Cora, and Carlos Beltran and the Mets decided to part ways, and they just recently hired their new manager. So what did you guys think about the penalties, draft pick removals, fines, and all that good stuff?
I mean, I think they were appropriate. I struggle with the idea. I know a lot of people are pushing for individual players to be reprimanded and disciplined as well that were part of that team, but my issue with that is a lot of those guys are on other rosters now, and so you're punishing teams that were not part of the scandal. If you're doing, you go back to that 2017 season and punish players from that roster that are now on other teams. There's also talk of stripping the World Series title.
Yeah, we haven't forgot about that 2017 incident. Don't think we just glossed over that.
Yeah, it is a tough situation for all involved. I think the commissioner did the right thing, and he made the right call. I think obviously the management, the GM, Jeff Lunho, I believe was his name, as well as A.J. Hinch, deserved the penalties that they got. I just think this is an unfortunate thing for the game of baseball, and as a big baseball fan, I hate to see that. I know Bobby's made the argument that maybe it's a good thing for baseball, bringing some attention to the sport, but I just don't necessarily see how the negative light, the negative side of things is going to help at all, but perhaps in the minds of the public it is something worth investing in. I just want to see baseball continue to thrive, and honestly, there's a lot of things that have happened in the history of baseball that have been cheating worthy. Things like my good friend Pete Rose, who is
put him in the Hall, baby.
Should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
Put him in the Hall.
Was betting on baseball. You have the Black Sox scandal. Obviously, the PED steroid scandal,
steroid era,
which was a big thing, and now kind of the big four. You now have the sign stealing scandal, and baseball's always been about getting a leg up on competition, but this seems to be a little too far, and I think the punishments were realistic and deserved.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that sign stealing in and of itself is just gamesmanship.
Oh, for sure.
It's not illegal to sign steal. Maybe teams don't like it when you steal signs. That seems more of a personal problem, if you ask me, if you're allowing the other team to steal your signs because you're not switching them up enough or you're making them too easy. But sign stealing has always been an integral part of playing baseball. It's when you start using illegal methods to sign steal, as the Astros did with their whole setup with the camera and the trash can. Speculation is whether they were wearing buzzers underneath their jerseys or not. But I think, it's always important to, remind ourselves that sign stealing in and of itself isn't illegal. It's the methods by which you try to sign steal is where you get in trouble.
Oh, of course. I mean, you're taught from a young age in Little League, look in from second base. You're looking in at the catcher's sign.
Help your batter out.
You're helping your batter out. The third baseman coach, maybe a little bit of leaning out of the box. And, I mean, those sorts of things are accepted and part of the game of baseball. It's strategic. But when you have an unfair advantage with technology that the other team doesn't possess, I think that's the big difference for me. The other team doesn't possess that ability in that particular game. That's when you've crossed a line, because either team could look in from second base at the catcher and try to steal that way. And if you're not blocking your signs and you're not switching them up, that's your fault.
Yeah.
For not strategizing enough in terms of getting your message to your pitcher and being on the same page without other people on the base paths or in the coaching boxes finding out about that. So I would completely agree. Sign stealing in of itself is part of the game of baseball, but this has gone too far.
Yeah. One more thing, just to add quick before we move on. Bobby, I don't know if you have anything really to add. But
I do. I have something I'd like to say.
Give me 1 second. Just one more thing I think was important to note that some people didn't realize, I don't think, is that yesterday, I think I saw it on one of my ESPN headlines on my notifications, was that the Astros players were granted immunity, of punishment from the league for their role in helping, admit to the scandal or whatever. So, I think there are some people who are pretty upset by that as well, that, since it was deemed by the MLB as a player-driven scheme, that the players should have been punished and be held responsible as well. But since they were granted immunity for their role, in the whole thing, in the investigation, that's not really going to happen. But it appears that, according to Astros owner Jim Crane, that the players are going to issue a strong statement of apology, and then look and try to move forward. So we'll see what happens there when spring training comes up right here in just under a month or so. But yeah, Bobby, go ahead, give us your thoughts, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. I was a big fan of the punishment handed down by the owner himself, Jim Crane, towards his management. I thought that was big. Thought the MLB and Jim Crane came up a little weak in the players department. I think that's absolutely disgusting what has occurred, and the whole immunity situation I think is a bunch of hogwash, if you ask me. These are the people that were the day-to-day. These were the people that were out there, on the field, potentially with buzzers. I think they kind of just glanced over that whole thing. I think they could have done a little bit more to look into that whole front. I know they said they did an investigation, came up with nothing, but it seemed very rushed to me. I think this is just a ploy by baseball, and the reason that they weren't suspended is because baseball knows that, if these big name players for the Astros are a competitive team next year, even with those picks stripped, probably will be a competitive team next year in the MLB. If they get suspended, or the stars that went to other teams, as Dennis mentioned, get suspended, now we're really starting to take a hit to our ratings, to our bottom line.
All about that money. And I think that the lack of handing down a punishment by the owner and by the MLB, especially by the MLB on that one, because I'm not expecting the owner to suspend his own players from play. I think that's just a little underwhelming there, and I think that you gotta punish the boots on the ground just as much as you punish the brains of the operation. And the fact of the matter is, it's completely a money ploy by the MLB, and I understand it. And as Dennis alluded to, I have made the argument that this could get people talking about the MLB and potentially bring eyes to the sport. People are maybe even rooting against the Astros, but even just supporting another team to get eyes on the games. But I think this is just absolutely ridiculous. I think those managers and executives will probably find their way back to the MLB in some way, just based on the success that they've had to this point. Who knows how much of that was with cheating ways? Given if this was just an isolated incident, they'll more than likely find their way back. But I just think the MLB should have. You can't necessarily grant immunity to the people that were doing it. Just for the fact that they ratted out their superiors. That just seems like a whole very dirty ploy to me. I understand if they get a reduction in their punishment, because you see that same kind of concept in the legal system. Yeah.
But no, you got to face some time for doing this, and you can't be. These players knew about this, obviously, and whistle blew it and didn't do it. They won the World Series and nobody even knew about it. So you got to come clean, and the MLB needs to hand down the punishment. Should have handed down the punishment, And that don't even get me started on the whole World Series stripping.
I know we got to move on, but I just want to say one more thing before we do. It's frustrating to me because Jeff Luhnow is a fantastic GM. I mean, I read the whole book, the Astro Ball book, when he uses statistics and also his scouts knowledge and baseball knowledge, and he kind of combines it in this really smart way. He's a very smart guy, but it's just unfortunate to see that we've gone to this extent now, and he has to be punished. I do think he probably will find his way back into the game, but it's just not going to be the same for a guy who was an innovator within the game of baseball. And now he's being punished for something he really shouldn't have done. So
just as with KD's championships in the minds of some people, 2017 title will always have an asterisk next to that name. Going into the NFL, just a bit of a prelude, just to get us warmed up in our NFL talk. Tom Brady, lots of speculation, after their early exit from the playoffs, where he's going to end up next year, if he retires, if he moves elsewhere, if he stays in New England. Just wanted to briefly get your guys' thoughts on where you think Tom Brady will end up. For me personally, I would be very surprised if he was not in a New England uniform next year. But Bill Belichick, as we all know, was plotting Tom Brady's overthrow just a matter of years ago with how he wanted to keep Jimmy G on the team, good old Gucci Garoppolo, so that he would be able to take over for Tom Brady. So it'll be interesting to see where the Patriots go. I'm sure the draft will give us a good inclination, because I don't think any of the quarterbacks on their current roster are going to be good enough to take over for the Patriots in a starting role at this point. So I would be very hard-pressed to see Tom Brady, leave New England this year, even though they sold their home in Massachusetts.
Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Derek completely. I don't think that Tom Brady is going to play in another uniform that's not New England Patriots. I mean, he's built his whole career there. He is, in my opinion, a lifetime Patriot. And so I think he'll be there until he retires, and I don't think he's ready to retire. And so for that reason, by logic, I think he'll be returning to New England. But we'll see how it pans out. A lot of people have talked about, I've heard, Tom Brady's not denying it this time. Usually he was very much against it. Like, nope, I'm playing for the Patriots. And this time he hasn't really come out and said that necessarily as explicitly as he has in the past. And so people are speculating about that, but I just don't see him going anywhere else. But then again, I never saw Brett Favre going anywhere else, and Look at how that went.
Yeah, went to Minnesota. Bobby,
Yep.
Speculation where he could be going to the Chargers, maybe the Raiders. What's your opinion?
I think number one option is still the Patriots, like you guys mentioned. I think people forget Bob Kraft said he will either be with us or he'll be out of the league,
right?
Essentially. So I think that was a pretty clear inclination. I think after this year, however, if Brady remains, Belichick goes. If Tom Brady doesn't end up with the Patriots after next year, I'm thinking my number one, I don't know, maybe most likely, but place that I think could potentially be a sleeper to get him is Dallas. I think Dallas, with the pending contract negotiations with Dak Prescott, could find themselves into we got Tom Brady kind of thing. I think that would be really interesting to see. Wow,
how about that?
But just because Dak Prescott, that they've said that contract has been urgent for months and that hasn't gotten done. It leads me to believe maybe Jerry Jones pulls something crazy he's been known to do, and goes out and secures Tom Brady for big money. Jerry Jones is a businessman. It would be something that I could definitely see him doing. But
I'm sure it's on his radar, but I think Dak is their future, and they're probably not willing to mortgage 1 year of Brady for their future. Plus, with Mike McCarthy and, Dak's got a similar, play style. I won't say skill set, but a similar play style to Aaron Rodgers. He's mobile when he needs to be. He can be accurate. I think Prescott and McCarthy will be a good matchup. Since Prescott doesn't quite have the football mind Aaron Rodgers had, they won't really butt heads like they did in Green Bay. That would be a surprise, though. That would definitely shock the world and really turn the NFL on its head if that happens.
As I said, not the most likely, but a sleeper situation, especially if the Dallas Cowboys aren't able to, only if the Dallas Cowboys aren't able to get that contract done with Dak Prescott. Of course, they could employ the franchise tag, but I still think that is potentially a possibility, and I could see that becoming a reality over the next year.
Yeah, for sure. Segueing, Thomas Edward Patrick Brady should have 2 more Super Bowls, but he does not. And that is purely due to the effort and willpower by one man named Eli Manning. We all know recently that Eli announced his retirement. He stole 2 Super Bowls from Brady in his career. If it wasn't for Eli Manning, Brady would be at 8 Super Bowls, which would just be an unprecedented, disgusting number of Super Bowls that I would have loved to see him reach. But yeah, Eli Manning retired, great career. What do you guys think? Is he a Hall of Famer or is he not a Hall of Famer?
I mean, Eli is a tough situation just because he has had such success in the playoffs, especially the Super Bowl, against a for sure Hall of Famer in Tom Brady. And so that's certainly an interesting argument, but the last couple of years he really hasn't necessarily finished strong. I mean, he was replaced by rookie Daniel Jones, and I struggle to see him as a Hall of Famer, but you've got to look back at some of the stuff he did early in his career, and it certainly screams Hall of Fame. So it's on the border for me. I would tend to leave him out. Even though he has the Super Bowl success, I just don't think he has the regular season consistent success and domination that we've seen out of a lot of the players that are deserving in the Hall of Fame. And so for that reason, I think I would leave him out. But I could see the argument for putting him in, especially with his Super Bowl success.
Dennis, that is just pure blasphemy.
Blasphemy?
That is absolutely blasphemous. People like to look at the tail end of Eli Manning's career and say, what'd you do? But the man is one of only, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks to win multiple Super Bowl MVPs. He is one of 5. He joins the list that includes Hall of Famer Terry Bradshaw, Hall of Famer Bart Starr, future Hall of Famer Tom Brady, and Hall of Famer Joe Montana.
Oh, could you tell me how many good years Eli Manning had of his career? I would love to hear that.
Because I wasn't a New York Giants fan, I can't really,
okay, fair enough,
give to the amount of good seasons he had. But the man is, I believe, 7th all-time in passing yards.
The man has finished with a career top 10. And I'll piggyback off you, Derek, because I'm in agreement with you here, I believe. Eli Manning has a career 57,023 passing yards and also top 10 in career touchdowns.
Okay.
With 366 career touchdowns.
There we go.
The man is a absolutely perfect 500 record in starting competition.
Okay.
I'm not gonna sit here and claim that that's what you're looking for out of a franchise quarterback. But
a lot of that came with relatively mediocre teams towards the tail end of his career.
But I tend to remind you that Joe Namath, also a Hall of Fame quarterback, had
Broadway Joe, baby,
had a similar record to Eli Manning and was a Hall of Famer.
There you go.
I'd also like to bring up the point that, I think it's important to look at who Eli Manning beat on his playoff runs. You hear a lot of pundits talking about this, but he beat the likes of Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Just to name 3 of those right there, and that's leaving out so many good other quarterbacks that he beat, and I'm just blanking on their names, but he beat some of the best to get there, and I think the fact of the matter is that I have no doubt that with today's Hall of Fame that he will make it in. I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that's a little bit disrespectful for the first ballot to put Eli Manning, a 500 quarterback, in on the first ballot. But I think with 2 Super Bowl MVPs and
2 Super Bowl championships.
The man deserves the opportunity to be in the Hall of Fame and will find himself there one day.
I agree. Dennis, I know you're shaking your head, but it's ridiculous, Dennis. You don't think he deserves the Hall of Fame whatsoever?
Like I said earlier, I could see that you could make the argument. I just think that there's a lot of talent out there. And is Eli Manning talented? Of course he is. Did he have a fantastic career? Of course he did. I just don't see him over some of the other options. Like Bobby said, he's not going to be a first ballot. The guy led the league in interceptions 3 years. He has done some fantastic stuff, but at the end of the day, you have to be elite, and I just don't see it.
I don't think you do have to be elite to be in the Hall of Fame. I think
it's a Hall of Fame.
I think you can pick out, some players in there that wouldn't necessarily be called elite. I'm not really able to pick any off the top of my head at this moment. But, you could make the case that during some point in his career, Eli Manning was elite. He was elite enough to at least win 2 Super Bowls, which is more than probably the majority of the Hall of Fame can say, is that they have multiple Super Bowl championships, let alone multiple Super Bowl MVPs. So I agree with Bobby. I don't really think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he reserved that for the likes of, the Ray Lewises, the Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady's, Joe Montana's, Dan Marino's. Let's keep in mind, Dennis, Dan Marino doesn't even have a chip. Don't think I don't remember that Dan Marino doesn't have a chip. Not to say that championships are all that matters, but when you get to the top of the mountain twice, and you have to score points to win Super Bowls, and you have to be clutch to win Super Bowls, which is what Eli Manning had to do twice to my own heartbreak. My own heartbreak I watched as David Tyree pinned the ball to the top of his helmet, and as Mario Manningham, former UMich Wolverine, made the toe tap touch sideline grab to extend the drive. Don't think I don't remember those, Dennis, and the throws that had to be made to put themselves in a position to succeed.
I just want to, before I...
I'm not off the hook yet. That's what I'm sensing here.
I mean, Tony Romo, Brett Favre, Tom Brady 2 times.
Tom Brady 2 times, Dennis. Twice.
Matt Ryan. Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
I don't know who was the quarterback for San Francisco in 2011-12.
Alex Smith, probably.
But 1 at Candlestick.
Yep.
And then, again, I go for Tom Brady. All of those games in both, I think, all except maybe one of those games was an away game. So every single one of them was on the road except once in the wild card. So 8 or 7 road games out of 8, all against basically almost all of the Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dennis, unfortunately you're in the minority on this one.
Well, that's okay.
And we may not be able to sway your opinion, but I think one day you're going to see Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame, and unfortunately on that day, we're going to make you eat your words.
Well, you've got the recording, and you can reference it.
24-2.
What's 24-2?
In the wild card of his first, or his second run, 24-2.
All right, moving on. Eli Manning, future Hall of Famer. The Pro Bowl skills competition is tonight. Sort of in the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN2. Are you interested in the Pro Bowl skills competition tonight? Anyone want to start us off?
I'll start it off. No, I'm not interested in the Pro Bowl skills competition, and I don't even know if the players are interested in the Pro Bowl skills competition, and I will not tune in.
Dennis?
I've got one word, and that word is no.
And I too, I'm not particularly interested in the Pro Bowl Skills Showdown. I don't even really know what time it begins. It's, the Pro Bowl, unfortunately, has just sort of fallen off into, something that isn't really, worth it for the players. It doesn't really have any meaning in terms of, playoff implications or anything like that. So the Pro Bowl, the one thing I'll have to say about the Pro Bowl, move it back to Hawaii, gosh dang it. Put it back in Hawaii where it belongs. Last thing before we end here, actually we do have 2 more things. 1, the Right Bench Ballers. 2 is a new segment we're going to introduce, and we're going to start with that one. The Garbage Time Takes Your Money Gambling Predictions segment. We're going to try and do this in our weekly episodes now. Dennis will not be joining us for this week's predictions just because we kind of put it together last minute. But me and Bobby just briefly went over one game that we're going to go over today. Future episodes we'll look at more games than just one. We'll probably look at the Super Bowl itself, since Super Bowl Sunday will be not this upcoming Sunday but the next. But tonight our one game that if you are a bettor and you want to take some advice from some definitely not professional or really educated or experienced gambling predictions, we're your one-stop shop for that. Pistons-Grizzlies tonight at Little Caesars Arena at 7 o'clock Eastern. The Pistons are the Vegas favorite at -1.5, and the over-under is 227. Bobby, do you have the Pistons at 1.5, and what do you have the over/under or over? It's really a crapshoot of a game.
To be honest, if I was betting this game, I wouldn't bet either of those lines. If I was betting this game, I would bet the first quarter over 56.
Okay.
Because both teams have scored basically 30 points each in the first quarter of every game almost for the recent memory.
Okay.
These are two teams that are mediocre. They're both ninth, vying for a playoff spot. Not that great. We can't expect the defense to be super good. I would bet that they would score probably close to... I'm thinking they'll probably score closer to 64 between them. If I had to bet like what you said, the over-under or the spread, I would take Memphis +1.
Okay.
And I would say that it's going to be over 227.
All right. Locking that into the Excel spreadsheet that we'll be keeping track of over the coming weeks. Bobby was taking Memphis against the spread, taking the over 227. I am going to go the other way. I'll take Detroit covering the spread at -1.5, and which, for those of you who don't know, basically just means the Pistons have to win by 2 to cover the spread. So I have the Pistons winning by 2 essentially, and then I too will be taking the over. I think this game will be somewhere around the realms of like 125 to 120, something like that. So this week, me and Bobby, disagreement over the Pistons and the Grizzlies, but we're both going to take the over here.
As I said, if you're betting this game, bet first quarter over 56, because that's the bet that I think there's a little bit more meat on the bones. Yeah. Let me tell you, not necessarily in the winnings, but it's more of a lock that they'll score more than 56 points, just because, as I said, if we're both betting the over, so it's more than likely that they go over in the first quarter.
Yeah. So there you go. You can take that information or leave it. We don't really care. We're just doing it to have fun, but also just for a bit of bragging rights within the Garbage Time Takes podcast.
And I look forward to jumping in next week.
There we go. One more thing before we reach the Right Bench Ballers. NBA All-Stars were announced last night. Trae Young, Kemba Walker, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, and Pascal Siakam are going to be your starters from the East. Luka Doncic, James Harden, LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Kawhi are going to be your starters from the West. Giannis was indeed the top vote getter of the East. LeBron was the top vote getter of the West. And, we'll talk more about, the reserves and everything next week when we have more time. But we just figured we would mention that the All-Stars were released and that Derrick Rose should be an All-Star. Put him in. Next, Zion. He made his debut earlier this week with the Pelicans.
He did.
Absolutely exploded in the fourth quarter to score 17 straight points. Is that what it was? I know he scored 17 of his 22 in the fourth quarter, but he basically single-handedly willed the Pelicans back into that game. Unfortunately, much to the ire of NBA fans and pundits, Alvin Gentry removed him from the game at the advice of his general manager and team doctors as he's under a minutes restriction. Because, Zion, you don't want to risk his NBA career just to save one win. Some people would argue otherwise, that, hey, he was on a roll and the Pelicans may have won that game. But we'll get more into Zion and Zion's center and ESP Zion next week when we have more time. To close out the show...
Hey, before we go on to the next segment... What shirt do I have on, boys? Come on.
You do have a New Orleans Pelican shirt.
And can you tell the audience when I got this shirt?
I know you have had that shirt since at least our freshman year, if not before.
That's right. I'm not a bandwagon fan. So everybody that is in the audience and thinks that I'm only rooting for the Pelicans because of Zion can shove it.
Me and Bobby had an enjoyable time watching Zion's return to action in the NBA on the other night when the Pelicans took the floor. That was a fun time.
I know, Bobby, your original Pelicans fandom came from Anthony Davis. Am I correct in that?
Oh, I love Anthony Davis so much, and yes, it did come from that. It also came from the fact that the Pelicans have the coolest logo in the NBA, in my opinion, and some awesome jerseys. And I just like the whole team and the whole small market, the franchise kind of thing. I just wish Gail Benson would pull the team out of the gutter like she has the Saints.
Well, Bobby, the Pelicans, are they up and coming?
Oh, I think
Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram,
I love Lonzo
Zion.
too.
Is this a team that we will see, making a run in the West in the next 4 or 5 years? You think?
In the next 4 or 5 years, yes. This season, they'll make the playoffs. I think if they take Zion off a minutes restriction relatively early.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. Zion's back. ESPN, I'm sure, is, overjoyed that Zion's back. They finally have some highlights to talk about.
Money.
Yeah, for sure. So, closing the show, Right Bench Ballers, our favorite segment, and yours. Dennis, you want to start us out with who you guys, your Right Bench Baller, as we wrap it up today?
Absolutely. So I struggled with this one a little bit. As most
NFL
of you know, the NFL is kind of my wheelhouse for getting some Right Bench Ballers, not necessarily the NBA. But I do follow college basketball quite intensely. And so I scoured the ESPN stats pool, and I came across a forward for the Clemson Tigers named Hunter Tyson. And he actually led the Tigers to victory over Wake Forest this week with a go-ahead basket in the final seconds to put them up for good. And a little further digging led me to find out that this man has averaged 6.6 points this season, and he scored 21 on Wake Forest, career high.
That is Right Bench Baller to a T. Dennis, what's his name again?
His name is Hunter Tyson.
Hunter Tyson.
Forward, came off the bench and scored 21. He is a sophomore who's averaging 14.9 minutes this season and 6.6 points in those 15 minutes.
There you go.
And last year he averaged 8 minutes and was 1.6 points a game. So this reserve player has really come in clutch for the Tigers and seems to be cruising right along. He definitely helped him to a win over Wake Forest.
There we go. Bobby, who you got?
I've got none other than Terrence Davis, shooting guard for the Toronto Raptors. Terrence is currently a third stringer behind Kyle Lowry, Norman Powell, and Fred VanVleet for that guard spot. He averages 17 minutes a game for the 30-14 Toronto Raptors. As I said, he comes off the bench in a more of a limited role, but in this past 5 games, he's had 2 0-point performances, which we don't like to see. But he's had 3 over 10-point performances, which is actually exceeding his average by at least 5 points in those games.
There you go.
One of those games, he even popped off for 23 points, 3 assists, and 7 boards, which you love to see from the young fella. And he's really just come on as of late and had 5 threes actually in that game, which matched his career high. So my right bench baller, Terrence Davis, for the Toronto Raptors, and who are having a great season in the East so far.
And of course, last but not least for me, none other than the star of John Wick Chapter 3 himself, Boban Marjanovic, the NBA's greatest character in my own humble opinion. Over his last 10 games, he's actually only played 5 of them, if that gives you just an indication of how much playing time he gets. Averages 11 minutes per game over his last 5, only averages 8 minutes over his season here. He, in their most recent game for the Dallas Mavericks against the Los Angeles Clippers, dropped a solid 12 points with 7 boards, 2 blocks, and a steal. Game before that against Golden State had 13 points and 11 boards, and a couple games before that against the Lakers he had 14 points and 10 boards. So Boban slowly and surely, being a solid contributor, double-digit scoring over his past 4 games, and seeing his minutes slowly creep up in those games. But yeah, Boban, the NBA's greatest treasure. We must protect him at all costs. But yeah, now that, the unfortunate injury to Dwight Powell, where he tore his Achilles. We'll probably see more of Boban, which is good for everyone in the sport of the NBA. So, just to recap our right bench ballers, Dennis came in with Clemson's own Hunter Tyson, the team who has beaten Duke and UNC.
And NC State.
And NC State,
That's
Duke
right.
and UNC on the road.
That's true, yes.
Won for the first time in school history at Chapel Hill this year.
Heck of a season that they're putting.
And they beat UNC and Duke for the first time in the same season in who knows how many years. So good for Clemson. Go Tigers. Terrence Davis was Bobby's with the Toronto Raptors. The NBA East second seed, are they right now?
Third seed, one game back of the second.
There you go. And for me, of course, last but not least, Boban Marjanovic. Well, guys, I think that is going to wrap it up for today. If you guys in the audience noticed, we didn't really talk about NCAA basketball because that's just been such a whirlwind of action and upsets and number ones going down and teams going on hot streaks and falling out of the top 25. That's pretty much going to be an entire segment in and of itself next week, along with our Super Bowl Sunday predictions, which we will be bringing next week.
That's right.
But yeah, before we sign off here, just want to thank you guys, our viewers. Thanks for waiting around for us to come back from break. As Bobby does a really good job with our social medias, we want to plug those. You can see the link to those in the description. Bobby, do you remember what the Twitter handle is?
At Garb Time Takes.
Garb Time Takes.
Garb Time Takes.
And
right.
The Instagram handle is at Garbage Time Takes. Please, if you're going to follow one of them, please follow the Instagram one. I try to keep that one a little bit more updated with polls where you can submit. It's just really easy to see questions that you guys would like to submit, and I always try to put up a ask us question poll before the morning of an episode. So if you are intrigued and want to ask us or see a topic on here, let us know, and we'd be more than willing to talk about it.
Of course. So I think that wraps it up once again. Thanks to you guys, the viewers. Hopefully we were able to give you some entertainment value this week, some knowledge, some insight, and we will see you next week. So if you guys are ready, I am on a 1.
And a 2.
And a 3.
Peace.